Welcome to Tree Talks, Talks with the Tree Whisperer. Your host, Kevin Lee from KRL Tree Service, brings a lifetime of tree work experience and a solid foundation in botany to every episode. Welcome and enjoy.
Good morning, tree lovers. It's Kevin Lee, the Tree Whisperer in Calgary. Another botany session. This is number 6. You're doing well. If you ever want to go a little deeper, take a reaffirmation of any of these, I would suggest that you check out my website. As I read this material through the last few years, I wrote a number of pretty solid essays on this. And you go to the articles section, menu choice on my website, krltreeservice.com, krltreeservice.com. You go to that articles choice, and there are 3 groups of the botanical orientated essays. The first one is in a free downloadable book that I wrote and put up on the net on my site. It's called Every Tree Owner. The other 2 are called Care and Feeding. That's a joke about taking care of your dog. And the other is just called the Botany Talks. So if you want to see this in written form and take your time and be able to go over and reread things, that is the place to find it. There's also an article in there called An Arborist Education, which actually lists the source books that I used to, first of all, get this stuff into my head and then get it out of my head down on paper and then back out of my head again in what we're doing now. So as you well know in your own learning experiences, you download, you process, and then it needs to come out somehow. So that's a good thing. You start talking to other people or looking at trees and talking to tree people or your coworkers or gardener friends or whatever. So anyhow, this is episode number 6. We are going to deal with water movement today. This is a major part of trees' lives. They speak of the human body being nearly full of water. This would be more so or greater even when you think about something as dynamic and literally fluid as a tree. Water movement is everything. Trees didn't have a lot to work with when they evolved, and it was just a tough situation. They had sunshine, they had gravity too. They had air and the soil and the water in the soil, and that was all they were given. So the idea that you could be 400 feet high and get water all the way to the top, well, 400 feet is a nice little hill. That's a pretty good climb. Lifting something 400 feet really takes, there's a mechanism there for sure. So anyways, trees solved that problem. Plants solved that problem. Initially, it was smaller plants that solved the problem. And as I spoke of back in cells and cell walls, we had to develop the reinforced sclerenchyma is the correct word. Reinforced inner walls, cellulose, lignin, very strong. So there's the primary wall. The second and third walls would be sometimes plating or just all sorts of different helical, rectilineal. There's all sorts of names and patterns for this, but it's the patterns of how the reinforcing material and the lignin especially is laid down so that the cell can still function. We don't want to, even though it's going to be dead at maturity, we certainly don't want to plug the entire thing and put a pipe within a pipe, because at that point, the natural openings, the plasmodesmata, and what we have in conifer tracheids, they're the vessel cells of conifers, are pit pairs that line up and exchange water that way, whereas vessels, broadleaf trees, have plates at the bottom, and they are perforated. They have holes in there. And again, just reinforcing that whole sieve-like concept that I've talked about, such amazing movement and pressure. So Anyways, so yes, plants solved their problems. They built cells that could stand up, and you could stack them up in their uncounted millions and get them up, as I said, 400 feet high. Now that's a rare exception. That, of course, is referring to a redwood tree in California, but even 30 feet is quite an accomplishment. So yeah. Let's talk about water a little bit, because this is about water movement, so we might as well start at the base. Water is an amazing molecule. It is literally life. All life uses water in some way. It's just the way that Earth works. 70% of our land mass, or excuse me, the surface of the Earth is water. Yeah, it's a sea. It's pretty salty, but we have this amazing system called the hydrological cycle: evaporation, and then again, rising, cooling, movement of the great weather patterns of the globe, rainfall, snowfall, again, erosion, washing minerals down to the sea. It's just an amazing thing. Forests very much affect climate because of the amount of water that they move. It sounds unbelievable, and I do welcome you to get on, do some research on this. At least 95% of the water, excuse me, that a tree moves through its body in a day is lost through the leaves, through the stomata, in a process called transpiration. Okay? So that's what I mean, that they didn't have a lot to work with, and it just ended up being a system that is very, you could say, water inefficient. It does make an amazing system. And as I said, the amount of evaporation out of large forests does very much change, alter, and well, it just helps make rain is what it does, because that water's in the atmosphere as vapor now, and it's going to be part of the hydrological cycle very soon. So anyways, yeah, large tree, 100 gallons of water absorbed out of its mass of soil during the day. At least 95 gallons will be lost to transpiration through the stomata. That's pretty amazing. So this is why we never find trees in the hottest, driest, barren, waterless places. They just, a certain minimum has to be met there, or it's just not going to work. So yeah. Water, as I said, is an amazing molecule. It's very, very sticky. And if you just run your hand under the tap and then just do that with your fingers, you can just see and feel that little bit of tension. That water just doesn't want to be torn apart from its neighbors and friends. Water loves itself and is very sticky. So we call that tension. It really likes to stay together. And if you try to pull it apart, it takes a lot of tension. Another thing that it does is it clings to surfaces like the inside of tubes. And so that is called cohesion. Yeah, those are the two aspects of water molecules that are pretty amazing. So if you put water in a small enough tube, like a vessel element or a tracheate, and you had some way of moving it upwards, and actually that's going to end up being evaporation from the leaves, you could accomplish that miracle. With expending no energy, you could move that water 400 feet up. So it's called the cohesion tension model of the ascent of sap because of that. So the small diameter, 50, 60, 70 microns, excuse me, of the tracheate vessel elements, their openness inside, they have, after they developed, their internal cytoplasm was removed, and they are a dead, in a sense, a skeleton of a cell with a strong cellulose and lignin wall still in place. Holes in the ends, and you line all that up. In a sense, and I will get into this in a little more detail in a couple of minutes, but The leaves are like the mouth on this long straw that draws the water out of the twig, out of the branch, out of the major subtrunk, out of the trunk, out of the major root, out of the secondary, third, fourth, all the way down to this year's annual growth of non-woody roots, which can have a tremendous amount of soil volume at its command. And if there's moisture in there, molecules of water, drops of water, if there's large spaces, the spaces between soil particles are called pores. And if there's any water in there, water that's still free enough to be removed with the negative water pressure that's generated by the evaporation from the leaves, then that tree is going to get a drink and it's going to move through that entire system. So into the non-woody roots, which are highly absorptive. From there into the xylem structure inside the woody root structure. Okay. From there into the trunk, from there up into a subtrunk, from there into a branch, into a twig, and into a leaf, and then out the stomata. The most important thing the water does is supplies some material for the process of photosynthesis. And that's an essential part of photosynthesis. We have to have carbon, CO2 from the atmosphere. We have to have water that's come up, as I just described, H2O, and we have to have an energy source. Those molecules are split and recombined, and so photosynthesis generates a single molecule, excuse me, of sucrose, and it also generates some water vapor. Another thing that it generates is oxygen as a byproduct, a waste product. So the great takeover of the land some 400 million years ago by plants, as they started moving, evolving, changing, and finding new places to grow and new ways to grow, they had a lot to do with the oxygenation of our atmosphere. I spoke of lots of conveyance tissues and pipes. There are changes through the whole system from root up to leaf. I didn't speak of the water movement within the leaf. As you know, all leaves have veins. A vein that you see, there's the large one called the midrib, and then it splits and splits and splits, and it keeps splitting. It's a similar pattern to our own arterial and venal system. In the human body, a capillary will get down to almost every single cell that you have and bring it nutrients and oxygen, and the venal system, of course, will take away its waste products, take away the deoxygenated blood, send it back on its cycle to the heart and lungs again. In trees and their leaves, things are a little bit different. There is no pump. The pump is the negative water pressure of the evaporation of the leaves I just described. So you can see the midrib, the main veins, and they split and split and split down to the point where there is a supply pipe from the xylem side. The midrib contains both the xylem and the phloem on separate sides, separate pipes in one major pipe. All the veins work that way, all the way down to the size where we can't see them anymore. The water and nutrients are delivered, into small sections of cells, maybe 3-4 individual cells is all that it needs. Plant cells are really good at moving things osmotically back and forth between each other through their walls, as I have described earlier. And so that is enough. The phloem, of course, takes sugar from the chloroplasts. These are the cells that are green, chlorophyll, and it's chloroplasts and their amazing internal structure that are actually the active physical structure of photosynthesis. And they generate, as I said, some sucrose. And this is downloaded into the sieve tube elements of the phloem tubes. Again, the first ones are so small that we can't see them. So that is a little bit about leaf structure and water in leaves. Yeah. Where that ends up is called the mesophyll, the inner tissue of the leaf. And this is a place where it has access to the CO2 gas that's been allowed into mostly through the bottom of the leaf, through these gate-like openings, combination of cells called a stomata. Stomata are an amazing part of the water system. They are the only non-woody root part, and they play a very, very important role. So what happens is as the water in the soil decreases and the tree is not getting what it needs, what will happen is the tree senses this. It's been losing too much through evaporation. It's the hottest part of the day. It is time to close the stomata. Stomata cells are like guard cells. They are literally like this. When they're open, the space in between my hands allows the carbon dioxide into the leaf, into the mesophyll. When water concentrations drop, the stomata close like that. The gates are closed, and it is an amazing strategy. It's not all that's needed, and it doesn't accomplish everything, but it is a first method of water retention that works very, very well. If the drought conditions continue and the leaf just can't get what it needs, it will wilt. We don't see this on evergreens. They're kind of hard to read that way as far as how are you doing today with your water needs there, buddy. But a broadleaf plant, broadleaf tree, just look at the top or tips or even halfway up, and it's amazing to see this. You'll know that the tallest, farthest leaves are, of course, the farthest from the water source, the soil in the ground, in the soil that the tree's planted in. And we may have enough to get the water half or 2/3 of the way up, but a tree's soil that's lacking in water on a hot day, you look up there, those leaves will not be stiff. They will not be standing upright, and they will not be full. They will be limp. We call that wilting. If you see that, get the hose for sure. So, yeah. In the number 5, in the section on the vascular cambium, I dealt with rays a lot. And speaking of the rays being underappreciated and sort of unknown factor in the symplast, the greater connected whole mass of all living cells. The only 2 types of cells, tissue, that move water in trees and plants are first the xylem, as I've described it. And how do we get the water into the tissues where it's needed? Because we know the greater symplast all the way from the top to the root tips. Every living cell has to have oxygen and sugar and water every second. We have living parenchyma inside, deep inside the trunk sometimes. To keep it going, we have to get it what it needs to. All living cells are respiration. This is the sort of 180 flip of the chemical process of photosynthesis. Respiration burns the sugar with oxygen and produces carbon dioxide. That's what we do. That's when you breathe out, you've taken most of the oxygen out of the air in your lungs for each breath. You've kept that. It's being circulated and used in your body in every living cell. And the carbon dioxide is expended. And then the tree breathes it in. Well, round and round we go. It's a pretty amazing system. So, yeah. There are some differences in the way that gymnosperms, that's another word for conifers. Gymnosperm means naked seed. So if you think about the difference between a spruce cone and an apple, there's a tremendous difference in what the seed is given. The naked seed means that they don't have a ovary. That's sort of what we could call an apple. It's protected. A lot of times there's tissue in there that will supply the seeds with the energy, and just either that or be an attractant, and somebody will move that seed away. Plants love to find new places to grow. So the naked seeds, if you open up any spruce cone or the cone of any conifer, before the scales, those are the woody sections of that make the cone, the little, you can almost call them branches. That's wrong, but it's the separate pieces of the cone. And at the base of those, when they're still growing and still maturing, if you crack one of those open, you'll see that, especially on spruce and those types of trees, there's two little black seeds, two little wee spots that are forming right close to the stem of the cone. They have no protection, no greater method of moving or being protected. They are just, once mature, they are free in the world, and they have to take their chances. So the vessel element in an evergreen is called a tracheate. These were the first really good vessel elements that were developed. The gymnosperm evergreen model is much, much older than the angiosperm broadleaf tree model. The difference in time is, we have the earliest gymnosperms about 350 million years ago. We have the earliest seed plants, flowering seed plants, as we know them, like the apple, at about 150 million years ago. So the conifer pattern and the conifer style tree, and some of them were early swamps that became coal and all sorts of things, oil and all of this, but they ruled the planet for approximately 200 million years before the much well adapted, better adapted, and highly competitive flowering trees came in and really just sort of ran them out. And in today's world, we find conifers in more northern areas, mountainous country. They are very tough and hardy and do very well that way. So the tracheate is very similar to the vessel element, produced again by the fusiform initials of the cambium. And rather than having perforated plates at their ends, they have tapered walls that just sort of align themselves like this, the bottom, the end of one and the end of another. In between my hands at this moment would be what had started off as those tiny holes in the cell walls called plasmodesmata. They would be larger now, and they're called pits. And those tend to form into pit pairs. When the alignment happens and the tracheates grow this way, we are assured of having those pits lined up for optimal water movement. So that's a slightly different system and slightly way of doing things in conifers. So that's about all I wanted to say about the water movement in trees. That sums up most of it. It's called the cohesion tension model of the ascent of sap. It is an engineering marvel, and it is the system and the only system to allow trees to be the tall, beautiful things that we have today. And it was really just a miracle of evolutionary adaptation. So thank you very much for listening. I will see you soon in episode 7, where we will deal with the sugar movement. And of course, that is in the phloem. So good day. Thank you.